Alright, Beta 4.4 v3 has finally been released today, and as expected, there are plenty of interesting changes that we need to talk about. As always, all of the information covered in this video comes from a reliable source, Nanoka. In the previous video, we discussed all of the adjustments Himiko Nova received in Beta 4.4 v3, including the changes to her signature light cone, talent adjustments, and the numerous buffs and nerfs spread throughout her kit. If you haven't watched that video yet, I highly recommend checking it out first so you don't miss any important information. Now that we've covered Himiko Nova, it's time to move on to another character who also received quite a few changes in Beta 4.4 v3, Rin Tohsaka. So how is Rin looking after v3? Did she receive major buffs like some other characters? Or did she end up getting hit with more nerfs than buffs? Let's break everything down one step at a time. We'll start with her signature light cone. Compared to the previous version, Rin's signature light cone received some fairly significant changes. Previously, it granted 18% crit rate and 36% skill damage. On top of that, all allies could ignore 10% of enemy DEF, while the wearer gained an additional 20% DEF ignore when dealing damage. However, in Beta v3, several important adjustments were made. First, the 36% skill damage bonus has been completely removed. Second, the team-wide DEF ignore effect received a substantial buff, increasing from 10% to 20%. And third, the wearer's personal 20% DEF ignore effect has been replaced with a massive 60% skill damage bonus. So if we simplify everything, Rin's signature light cone now provides 18% crit rate, 20% DEF ignore for the entire team, and 60% skill damage for the wearer. In other words, despite the changes, Rin's signature light cone still looks extremely powerful overall. Now let's move on to the changes made directly to Rin's kit. The first adjustment affects her skill. In previous versions, Rin's skill dealt quantum damage equal to 180% of her attack. In v3, that multiplier has been reduced to 160%. And the changes don't stop there. Her enhanced skill was also adjusted. Previously, the enhanced skill dealt quantum damage equal to 90% of attack to all enemies, plus an additional 90% attack to a random target. Now those values have been reduced to 80% and 80% respectively. This is a direct nerf to Rin's personal damage output. And since enhanced skill is one of her primary damage sources, it's definitely not something players can simply ignore. Next, let's move on to her talent. The first talent change affects the buff she provides to her teammates. Previously, whenever an ally consumed or restored skill points, Rin would grant them 100% crit damage for 2 turns. That value has now been reduced to 70% crit damage. This is probably one of the biggest nerfs Rin received in v3, especially because this buff represented a major portion of her team utility. As for her second talent, most of the changes are simply wording adjustments. However, there is one brand new mechanic that was added. Rin and Archer can now perform a joint follow-up attack after Archer uses his skill 5 times. Previously, the joint follow-up attack could only be triggered when the team's skill points dropped to 3 or lower. With this new condition, players now have an additional way to activate the combo attack, making it noticeably more consistent. Next, let's talk about traces. Out of Rin's 3 major traces, 2 received adjustments in v3. We'll start with the first one. This trace has been almost completely redesigned. Previously, it granted an additional 150% attack along with 20% DEF ignore. Now, the DEF ignore portion has been removed and replaced with 10% all-type res-pen. At first glance, this might seem like a nerf because losing 20% DEF ignore sounds pretty significant. However, res-pen is also an extremely powerful offensive stat. Because of that, this change feels more like a side grade rather than a clear buff or nerf. Now let's move on to the second trace. This one received a very nice quality of life buff. Previously, Rin only gained her 20% speed bonus after using her enhanced skill. Now, that speed boost is automatically active as soon as the battle begins. It's a small change, but definitely a comfortable one. Finally, let's move on to Eidolons. 3 of Rin's Eidolons received changes in Beta V3, Eidolon 2, Eidolon 4, and Eidolon 6. Let's start with Eidolon 2. This one received a pretty substantial buff. Previously, it increased the skill damage dealt by all allies to 110% of its original value. Now that number has been increased to 130%. Next is Eidolon 4. This Eidolon has been completely reworked. Previously, whenever an ally consumed or restored skill points, they would gain 10% speed for 3 turns. That effect has now been removed entirely. Instead, when Rin's talent crit damage buff is active, it can now stack up to 2 times. And finally, Eidolon 6. This one received a very straightforward buff. Previously, using Rin's ultimate granted 18 points of gem energy and an extra turn. Now, the amount of gem energy gained has been increased to 26. And those are all of the changes Rin Tohsaka received in Beta 4.4 V3. Looking at the overall picture, Rin is probably one of the characters who leans more toward the nerf side than the buff side in this update. Most of the nerfs directly target her personal damage. The skill multiplier was reduced. The enhanced skill multiplier was reduced. And the crit damage buff from her talent was also reduced. These are all core parts of her kit, which means their impact will be fairly noticeable. Now, to be fair, Hoyoverse did provide several compensations. Her signature light cone received some strong adjustments. The joint follow-up attack is now easier to trigger consistently. The second trace became more convenient to use. And several Eidolons received significant buffs. However, if we're specifically talking about E0S1 players, these changes feel more like a reduction in personal damage than a net increase in overall power. That's why it'll be extremely interesting to see what happens in Beta V4. There's always a chance Hoyoverse could restore some of the lost damage through additional adjustments, or perhaps introduce entirely new buffs in other areas of her kit. So what do you think about Rin's V3 changes? Do you think these adjustments make her kit more balanced? Or are you disappointed that so many parts of her damage output were nerfed? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Don't forget to share this video with your fellow Honkai starrail players so they can stay updated with all the latest information. And as always, your support through likes and subscriptions means a lot and helps the channel continue creating informative content in the future. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next discussion.